So this one's going to be called Lou Gehrig and baseball is self-overcoming. Um, and this kind of is the epicenter of heroism because before we've kind of talked about some of the external forces and factors, particularly social or cultural recognition, that go into forms of heroic baseball practice, right? In terms of a global phenomenon, a national one, a ethnic one, or a racial one, right? All of these different ways that baseball players stood in front of their communities and in some cases in front of the world and performed a heroic, cosmic heroic cultural act of revelation, effectively. But with Lou Gehrig, you kind of get to this core, this existential core, which is the direct engagement with baseball as a craft, the respect and the discipline that Gehrig gives to baseball as a craft, day in and day out, the cultivation and perfection of this physical form, which is the human body and the human spirit's relationship to baseball as a communication, as a vessel, as a medium for expression. And my idea of self-overcoming, at least when I term it philosophically, is it's fundamentally physical. Because when you're looking at the self, there's one kind of essential binary or one essential paradox of the human form and physicality is that the spirit or the soul, as I spoke about with baseball itself, is something that is immortal, it's ongoing, it continues. But the physical body undergoes a process of entropy and degradation, right? Through time, through essential thermodynamics, right? Through the nature of the forces and factors that act on the physical body as a organic biological vessel, right? And what you have with Lou Gehrig is something so profound, existentially profound, because of the total humble groundedness by and through which he devotes himself to the craft of baseball. And of course, it can be said he is an American icon or he's one of the most powerful figures in baseball history. All of these things can be said, but when it comes down to Lou Gehrig and who he is and what he does, the relationship is between himself and baseball. It's a sort of direct mirror for the work that he does on himself. And this is what I mean by self-overcoming. It's something that can be done through philosophy, it can be done through art, but I think its most powerful form is physical because it brings you into direct relationship with this paradox of the body and the spirit, right? The infinite or the eternal nature of the spirit and the physical limitations of the body. And this is like Willie Mays' The Catch, for instance, right? Willie Mays' famous catch in 1954. This is a moment of an incredible physical feat, right? That leaves fans stunned, and it becomes this iconic moment in baseball history because much of Willie Mays' career also acts in this trajectory in the sense that he's accomplishing something that goes beyond the bounds of the realized, the possible, the presumed limitations of reality and existence, much like Lou Gehrig's consecutive games played streaks, as well as a lot of the records that he set, particularly in terms of RBIs. Um, what baseball provides, and this is why it's such a fertile medium for discussing philosophy and spirituality, is it provides a theater for the self-overcoming of the soul. Otherwise, someone like Lou Gehrig would toil in obscurity, but he's provided this historical stage through which to exhibit this. Again, I'll use the term the monk-like practice of spiritual devotion to the medium. And this is what true discipline is. He comes in with his head down and he pursues the craft and path of baseball with absolute self-responsibility, absolute self-negation. And what I mean by self-negation is it's not Lou Gehrig doesn't exist anymore or his spiritual center doesn't exist anymore. It's that he has so thoroughly devoted himself to the craft of baseball that he enters into this transcendent metaphysical state of total presence, total devotion. And this is usually described in spiritual terms in terms of a devotion to God, right? In terms of a devotion to the higher spiritual self, which informs and is all things. And This is what self-overcoming really is. You have the immediate personal physical presence that's rooted and seated in this body that's subject to degradation, time, wear, and the forces of nature. And what you're finding through this spiritual path, through this medium of devotion and discipline and presence, is that higher self. You're finding that real communion with the spirit, and you're hearing that voice. And through that pursuit of that path, you come to this point of spiritual enlightenment. And this is what you see with Gehrig, as well as what you see with Hank Greenberg in a different context and Jackie Robinson in a different context. The reason why these figures are so important to the history of baseball, as well as Lefty Grove, as I discussed, is that in different ways they are called to make an impact that is not so often discussed or understood in terms of baseball history, American history, or even human history, in the sense that baseball provides the modern cultural stage for the realization of these very deep and profound spiritual callings. And the reason for the modern cultural stage is that it provides a recourse that is deeper than myth. It's the truth of history in the process of self overcoming that can be witnessed, observed, seen, felt, and understood on a physical, immediate level, not on the metaphysical plane of a story or an abstract tale or an archetype that has to be channeled through mind, right, or channeled through thought. These people are performing the heroic function of self overcoming, whether that's existential, whether that's racial, ethnic, global, national self overcoming. And it's something that can be seen, felt, observed, and even imitated. And this is what's so important. It brings me back to that DiMaggio quote about he plays 100% every single day, every single play, because he never knows if that's the first or the last time some kid in the stands is going to be watching him. This is the heroic template that baseball affords, and Gehrig's existential self overcoming is the most insular, in the sense that his calling is not, it's not directed outwardly in any sort of way in a sort of grand political statement. Um, if you understand what I'm saying, it's a spiritual calling that is directly between him and his toil and his work, his day in and day out practice. I brought up the term sadhana before, the spiritual practice or the spiritual discipline. And this consistent devotion and dedication, which itself is a sort of like a drum beat or a rhythm, which self perpetuates and grows and furthers this this discipline of attention and listening through that devotional act, right? So looking at baseball as this model for the possibility of self overcoming, particularly in terms of the ritual nature of it that occurs over decades, right? This is a history of 150, close to 200 years at this point now. This is a fertile medium for the exploration of this process of self overcoming, specifically because of how ritualized it is, how perpetual it is. It's a tradition, history of a tradition that allows for participation in a model that's not just private, but it occurs in the theater and the stage of baseball history itself. That's being cataloged, that's being archived, that's being remembered. And it's being experienced in the theater of the stadium day in and day out. It's something that, as DiMaggio understands, it's such a crucial understanding, and it's such an astute observation by him. It's something that he's so clearly integrated at a psychological level. He understands that baseball is a theater for moral and ethical witnessing of the responsibility of the human being to fulfill their highest potential. And this is something that, of course, occurs everywhere all the time. But baseball is such a fantastic microcosm for that exploration of the fulfillment of the highest potential of the individual. And what that provides an entire community, an entire culture, or an entire species as a template for real ethical devotion and action, bringing the spiritual plane into material physical reality through this relationship, right? Through this dialectical relationship between Gehrig and the craft, or DiMaggio and the craft, or Greenberg and the craft, and the impact that you're able to create through that devotional lens, right? The impact that Jackie Robinson is able to create as one of the most important figures of the civil rights movement in the United States of America. The impact that Greenberg is able to create in terms of dispelling worldwide through his action, through his devotion, through his cultivation of this greatness through craft, right? His cultivation of this attention through craft, dispelling this this mythology that is creating this wave of deep hatred and malice and resentment in the world. That's what's possible here, and it all starts in that place. It starts in that Gehrig root form of the existential process of self-overcoming. It's grounded in the immediacy of the practice. It's grounded in the immediacy of the discipline and the devotion, and that's ultimately a choice, right? Babe Ruth told Lou Gehrig at one point, why are you doing this? What's the point? Just take a rest day, right? Just take a break. But Gehrig's devotional lens was very different than Ruth's to the game of baseball. His understanding of the game of baseball was very different than Ruth. His practice was something that was so sacred to him, so fundamental, so part of the rhythm of his spirit, the rhythm of his soul, the rhythm of his presence, that it itself rings on and strikes a very, very, very deep chord because of that relationship. It's the continued return to that very grounded, very present practice of the routine. He goes onto the field, he hits, he fields, he goes to the weight room. Everything about his life is centered around that devotional practice. His entire character, his ethical center, is centered around that devotional practice. And slowly what you witness is the real spiritual self emerging, the spiritual self that emerges through that process of trial, through that progression of real spiritual presence and action on this field and terrain of the everyday. Baseball provides this medium through which Gehrig is actually able to achieve and access the higher self. And so when you hear that speech at the end of Gehrig's career, right, he proud to be a Yankee, right? He's the luckiest man on the face of the earth. He's been given this opportunity. What that is on the deepest level is a recognition. It's a spiritual recognition in the face of death that he has been given this opportunity, this real opportunity to, through the vessel and medium of baseball, achieve a level of self-overcoming that is a form of deep spiritual mastery, disguised as the everyday practice of baseball as it's observed from the outside. Right? In this kind of respect and discipline and craft that Gehrig is able to cultivate, it's much more abstract outside of the field of baseball. If you were going to look at maybe a practice of art with a paintbrush or a guitar or an instrument, if you were going to look at the practice of philosophy through books, right, through writing, through mind, the practice of baseball is a real, grounded, physical, devotional act that requires the total presence of the body and mind in unity, right? In unity. And that level of attention is the entire human being, focused, unmediated, direct, and imminent in and on the field of baseball itself. And so when you maybe a little kid goes to the baseball game and watches Lou Gehrig play, what they're witnessing is really the highest potentials of humanity, the highest unified potentials of humanity, and what is produced from that, which is it's almost a sort of transcendental ethics. When Gehrig makes that speech, you can see this transcendental spiritual humanity emerging from him. So when he actually speaks, it's a culmination of this devotional act. It's a culmination of decades of this devotional act. This is someone who is not particularly outspoken. This is someone who is not making wild and wide political statements. This is not someone who really had much of a character at all. Similar to DiMaggio in a lot of ways. This was someone who was a man of very few words. But when he spoke on that day in Yankee Stadium, He made that speech. It reverberates all throughout history because it's a culmination. It's a culmination of this deep process, this intimate personal engagement with baseball as self-overcoming. It's very profound. Providing that template, again, as I said before, and I'm using that Greenberg essay as a bit of a springboard into this one, providing that template, the greatest act or the greatest act of service, the greatest gift you can give to humanity is your own self-realization, the Ramana Maharshi quote. That in itself, in its most condensed existential value, is most apparent through Lou Gehrig and Lou Gehrig's relationship to baseball. The forging, the sculpting, and the crafting of the character, almost in a sort of Michelangelo fashion, in the sense that the physical form is really a spiritual form, right? This devotion to the sculpting of the human being. The Michelangelo quote that I brought up, and I'll bring it up again. I saw the angel within the marble, and I carved to set him free, right? You have this basic template of the human being, and when brought into relationship with this devotional craft, what you're really doing is you're sculpting and you're forging the soul. You're creating the aspect of perfection, and you're incarnating the aspect of perfection through this devotional practice, through which emerges the real possibilities and potentialities of the human spirit through the human form, through this total present intercoursing of the mind-body-spirit relationship, through this attention. And this is itself what creates the mirror of representation in the theater of humanity, so to speak, that a young child or whoever it is in the stands that's witnessing this process unfolding, there is an immediate intuitive understanding of what this person has done, right? It's a common human language beneath all words, right? Beneath all speech, that through that action, through that process and manifestation of that devotional action, the perfection of the devotional action, you understand what you're witnessing is someone who has overcome themselves. And that's the essential heroic process. That's the cosmic heroic process, because it's the incarnation of the higher self. It's the incarnation of the higher self on the plane of the earth and the earthly, which itself seems to be a paradox, but it's seeded through this perpetual devotional act of spiritual progression through this rote physical routine. And the level of profundity there can't be understated, because really when we're looking at baseball through this lens, we're looking at baseball as a process, if truly engaged, right? As something that avails the process of real spiritual self-realization. And so when we look back at Gehrig, right, at the deepest level, when you look at Lou Gehrig, you look at someone who overcame himself existentially through almost like the Sisyphus task or the Atlas task of this perpetual like rolling the stone up the hill, and then eventually he puts the stone on his shoulders, right? And the cultivation of that is something so profound, and it's something so beyond so many of the superficial concerns of this world. It's the real engagement with the possibilities of the soul. And when we see that through Gehrig, or when we see that through what Greenberg does in terms of his achievements amidst discrimination against the Jewish people and the rise of Nazi Germany, or when you look at that in terms of what Jackie Robinson did in integrating baseball, there's what you're seeing there. It's not just sort of common surface level legends of a culture or legends of a civilization. They are that, of course. But furthermore, what you're seeing are the spiritual potentials of self-overcoming, and the level of existential heroism that's necessary to find, become, embody, incarnate and express real and true meaning on the plane of the human being. So there's the video. I hope you enjoy. I'll catch you on the next one.